Welcome back to the Goalie Corner presented by One Stop Goaltending. I'm Coach Michael. Today, our special guest is Jackson Slauenwhite. The overall focus of what I'd like this episode to be is how do athletes manage stress, right? We think of it as pressure. You're the one who's kind of opened my eyes up to calling it what it is, right? It's stress. It's, I would say, more or less internal. But I have a different perspective than you. You're much more educated in this field than I am. And everything I've done is kind of just go from my personal experience with it, to be honest with you. So I'm very interested to dive into that conversation. But before we do so, can you give us a little bit of background for yourself, how you got into sports psychology, and also how you got into the hockey world with sports psychology, or why the hockey world seems to be like striking gold, essentially. Not
Right.
yeah, I don't love the way I word that, but
That could be kind of punny in a way though, because
kind of
that has
punny.
happened. So
That's true. But it seems like you've really found your calling based on your resume, your very long resume of hockey organizations, teams. You've worked with Hockey Canada for the last 6 years. I'm sure there's no endpoint in sight. It's gonna go until you
you
there's
can't go no
probably
more.
exactly right. So who are you? Where'd you come from? How'd you get here? And then we'll dive into the stress part of being a goalie.
Sure. Yeah, those are all really valid questions based on my admittedly weird background, considering the amount of hockey work that I'm doing. And we chatted about it briefly before we started recording here, but I grew up in Prince Edward Island. I actually grew up I didn't do any organized hockey at all, which is, I tell people this and they're kind of confused by it, but I wanted to when I was younger. Like my parents, for background, they had some connections to get some alpine ski equipment pretty cheap, and they had me on skis from the time I was like 2. So I didn't really have a choice at that point, but I had a lot of fun doing it. I loved going fast. I loved dripping, and at one point, my parents always had a backyard rink for my brother and I. Like, we'd be out shooting pucks all the time. It was great. And eventually all my friends were playing hockey. They're like, oh, like, Jackson, why aren't you playing hockey? So I asked my parents, like, hey, can I do both? And now, looking at it as an adult, I'm sure they just saw dollar signs in their eyes of like, oh God, no, we're not doing this. But they kind of let me know, like, hey, like, you've already been doing the ski thing for a while, like, you enjoy it. If you join in the hockey, you're going to need to do power skating for like a year or two where you won't even get to go play with your friends. And then when you do get there, it'll probably take you a while to work your way up to playing at their level. And they kind of just pushed me more towards staying on the ski side of things, which I ended up doing, and I don't regret it at all. Like, the reason why I got into sports, like, and mental performance in the first place, is because ski wise, like, I always felt like an underdog just based on where I was from. And for those of you who don't know, PEI has one tiny, tiny little ski hill. So you can learn there by all means, but to become a competitive athlete or somewhere like that is tough. So I always liked kind of having the chip on my shoulder and competing and proving people wrong that way. And when I qualified for my first national championship, that's when I really wish I'd had the mental skill stuff that I didn't have. Like, I showed up, I flew all the way across the country from PEI to BC. And the way that these kind of competitions work is you have a day where you can just kind of get a feel for the track that you're going to be racing on. Kind of like when you're golfing and you have like a practice round, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm looking at all these people around me from all these other provinces. Like, I'd competed from in the Atlantic provinces, so I hadn't really competed against anyone outside of there. So I'm looking at the people from Ontario, Alberta, BC, Quebec, and I'm just like, oh my God, they're so big, strong, good. I was only 13 at the time, but like, I felt like a boy amongst men, just looking around at some of these top people in the field, even at that age. And long story short, I totally choked when I was there. Like, I fell well below what I knew I was capable of doing and how I knew I could perform. And
Were,
that was sorry, go ahead.
were you able to get back there at a later age to that same kind of level?
Yeah. Yeah. So like I had a long flight back from BC back to
Yeah.
PEI and just being like, okay, I'm either going to quit because this sucks and I never want to feel this way again, or I'm going to figure out why it happened because I don't want to feel this way again. And I knew physically I had the talent to do a lot better than I did because there were people who were at that competition who I'd been beating consistently all year who beat me there.
Right. Okay.
So I knew physically that wasn't the issue. And I kind of realized, well, I didn't have the skills to handle my desire, my excitement, and the pressure I'd put on myself to properly let all my skills shine. So I started Googling things. I started reading books. I started trying to figure out, okay, why did this happen to me? And I started to figure out, okay, mentally, I just didn't have the skills. So like looking back, I could have saved so much time if I'd found someone like me who does my job to help guide me through this, but I didn't know that at the time. So I was just kind of experimenting on myself, basically. And I started putting these experiments into myself. I started working on it, training it, and like my performance improved greatly, which was fantastic. So once it started working well for me, my younger brother, who was like much better than I was at like he was as a skier from PEI, he was finishing like top 10, top 5, sometimes even top 3 in the country. Like he was, yeah, he's good. So I got to help him. Like once I started learning this stuff and I saw how well it worked for me, I wanted to help him because I saw so much potential in him and what he could do. So I started kind of helping him along with the mental performance stuff as well. And it worked great for him too. And that made me like, I got more of that than when it helped me. So I was like,
Right.
okay, if it worked for me and it worked for him and I enjoyed helping him do it, maybe I can do this for other people.
Right.
So yeah, it's a long story of how I got into it at first, but there you go.
What's that age difference between you and your brother?
Just 2 years.
Wow. I'm sure there was probably a couple times where both of you were sick of each other at that moment. It's like, I'm trying to help you. Stop. You're not
Yeah.
my, yeah.
Well, you know what? Like
Just that.
when we were competing, like again, like when we were training and competing against each other directly, it could get like that a little bit, but we were both very good at recognizing the underlying desire of, okay, we're both trying to make something special happen here.
Right. Right.
So we were like, we'd get close, but we never let it bubble over to that point. We always kind of
Nice.
kept the big picture in mind, which was good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So long story short on that, I went to school for the mental performance side of things. That was fantastic. Then when I was done, I went back home to get my professional certification because you can't just hop out of school and start. Well, you could hop out of school and start doing this, but then you aren't properly certified. And if you want to get this work done, you want it done right.
Yeah. It takes
So
time.
yeah. So I started learning under somebody back home, back PEI, and this person was working with the Charlottetown Islanders, the QMJHL team at the time. So I got to tag along and kind of watch what she was doing and offer some insight and help out here and there. And I'd go to, I'd go to practices, I'd go to games, I'd talk with the staff, I'd talk with the players just to, and I still see myself as a student at this point, really. Like
That's a very healthy look, to be honest.
yeah. Like I was just trying to soak up as much as I could and learn as much as I could and be helpful in any way that I possibly could. And after a while, she kind of said, like, I can see how much you enjoy working with this group, and I can see how much the group enjoys having you around. How would you feel about, taking the reins and working with them full time? I jumped out. I was like, okay, this sounds awesome. Because like, even though I didn't grow up playing the game, like I grew up watching it. I was always a fan of it. Right. Like I feel like in some ways, almost every Canadian household has a bit of that influence. Right. But like, it's such an exciting and exhilarating game. I don't know how you could not like it.
That's fair. It's pretty hard not to grow up enjoying it in Canada. especially
Yeah,
right now, time of recording, we're one game out from game 7 of the playoffs or the Stanley Cup Finals. So it's kind of
yeah,
hard not to be aware of that.
100%. I've been geeking out on this series. It's been really good.
It's been crazy, the ups and downs.
Oh yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah. And like I always got to look at it from the mental. I can't help it, right? It's just how I do it.
Yeah.
But it's been fascinating, so fascinating. And obviously, like I'm not there. I don't know the teams and the staff, so I can't say that I know what's going on. But just based purely on what I see and what I hear, like yeah, mentally, it's a fascinating situation.
I want to be a fly in the wall with whoever's going to have the conversation of the Edmonton Oilers record, the first 3 or 4 games of the series and the last 3 or 4 games of the series. Like they're undefeated in game 5, 6, and 7 this year, and they're 4 for 8 in games 1 to 4, something like that. I can't remember exactly if it's game 1 to 4 or 1 to 3. That blew me away when they showed us that statistic. I'm a little hopeful, and hopefully that ages well, but it truly is crazy. I just want to circle back real quick because I'm curious, being from
Sure.
BC, I used to be a snowboarder pretty heavily. What mountain were you skiing on out here in BC when you came for the
Silver Star.
oh yeah, right in up by Vernon.
Mm-hmm.
Did
Yeah,
that a couple times.
I loved it there. It was so
Yeah.
cool, especially like coming from like the bunny hill, the beginner bunny hill at Silver Star is probably close to the size of where I would have been training on a regular basis. Probably like
Wow.
getting to go to those big resorts, those big mountains is so much fun.
Might have to move out here, hey?
Mm, yeah, yeah. Get the right offer. Yeah, consider it.
Yeah, that's fair. It's fair. Um, that's also very it's a terrible word, but very cool. Like teenager lingo here. Um, that like your mentor was able to see you having that success with the team and the team enjoying being with you and taking that step back and be like, here's an opportunity for you, right? That's very humble of this person to do and very rare, I might say too, right?
I'm always going to be grateful for it because in many ways that was sort of the first domino that set everything that I've done hockey wise in
Yeah.
place moving forward. Like being in such a small place, and one of the cool things I love about junior hockey is across the country you will have these smaller markets, these smaller communities where they have a team of that caliber,
Yeah.
and like just seeing the talent and the work ethic and the athletes in that league, it's just incredible. And I just love that you don't have to live in a massively large place to get exposed
Yeah.
to that. So I love that aspect of it. But for me, it's just like so much of it is just pure luck. The fact that that's where I grew up, that I had the opportunity to do my certification there, that they had that level of team. Because once I started working with them and had some good reviews, then other opportunities kind of started to pop up, and it really all snowballed from there. So I'm always going to be grateful for that first chance, that first step in the door, because it's really paved the way for everything that's moved forward since.
Awesome. Well, moving forward, we shall. And
Right on.
so trying to find the correct wording, I would say 90% of people call it pressure. As a goalie, I always thought of it as there's 2 different types of pressure that gets put on to an athlete. There's the internal pressure and then the external pressure. And the external pressure, you can't really do anything about it. It's how you receive it. It's just people talking. It's just noise. So I was always, as an athlete and with the athletes I coach now, I'm like, kid, like we can't do anything about that. So those people are going to talk. They're going to make those posts. They're going to make those articles. It's up to you to change your relationship when you see that, if you hear it, whatever, with that kind of information coming your way. What I always cared about is what am I thinking at the moment, or what is that athlete thinking about themselves in this moment, right? Like pretty simple right now, Stuart Skinner, right? Pretty easy to pick him out of a crowd right now. First three games of the Stanley Cup Finals, I think it's safe to say it would have been extremely hard to find a positive article about him.
Mm-hmm.
And now, after the last three games, it would be pretty hard to find a negative article about him. That's a huge flip flop, right? I care more about what Stuart Skinner thinking, if he's even thinking or if he's just being in the moment, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
So I always called it pressure. Can you tell me why you're calling it stress, or what made you come to a little bit of an outlier in the fact that you do call it stress and categorize that as a stress level?
Yeah, well, like the way that I see it, if you really think about what pressure is, like even if we were going to, so much of this stuff can be subjective. So I'm just going to put it from my point of view and what I've seen it from other people. But
Perfect.
when you think about pressure, it's this idea of, okay, here's this outcome or this thing that you probably want to happen, or someone wants to happen, or someone expects that you're capable of doing. And pressure is almost like the uncertainty between what is expected or what is desired and what is believed is possible and what can happen based on what's going on. Like the more big or high of an outcome there is that could happen. So like, winning a Stanley Cup, like that's a massive possible outcome.
Yeah.
And with like the bigger the outcome, the more expectation, the more pressure there's probably going to be with it. Right. And usually this is all linked to the things that we want to happen and where our belief and perspective is of, okay, can we do that or not? Is that possible? Okay. And one of the cool things for me, and one of the reasons why I like to kind of just simply label it as stress is that feeling that we get when it comes to having a goal or an outcome that we care about. And when I say care about, I mean it's either something we want to happen or something we want to avoid happening. Okay. You can care both ways.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so whether it's something you care about and you want it to happen or something that you want to avoid happening, it's that perception of, well, is this going to go my way or is it not? And thinking about the consequences either way that add the pressure onto it, add the stress onto it. And typically we are always feeling this kind of pressure, the stress, thinking about something that's happening in the future, right?
Yeah.
It's not what's happening right here, right now. It's thinking about, okay, here's this outcome that we want to happen in the future. And how we judge our track towards that thing or our track to avoid that thing we want to avoid, like that's where it comes from.
So curious, because you kind of spiked a memory. People always said you have to love to win, but you've got to be afraid of losing or something like that, or you got to hate losing.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost kind of sounded like you're talking about that when you're saying you're like the outcome you want and the outcome you don't want, right? It's saying the same thing. It's how you're looking at it.
Bingo.
Right. And then I think it's Bruce Lee. It's like what you think about or what you think you're going to do, you're going to do. Right. Oh, we're going to
100%.
lose. Probably going to lose.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. We get what we think about.
Why do you think it's so? This is a bit off topic and a big question. So I apologize in advance.
No, this sounds good.
Why do you think it's so easy for humans to think negatively first?
Oh, because we're wired to do it.
But why?
Well,
like, let's not get worried too much about the science, maybe, but can that be rewired?
Yeah. So here's what I'd say about that. So we are wired normally to, our brains do two things. They're automatically wired to look for threats and danger, and they are prediction machines.
Okay.
So we're always, and this was because way back in the day, anytime that a human stepped out of their
Cave.
house, their cave, whatever, if they weren't constantly scanning and looking for bears and tigers and all that, the ones who didn't scan were the ones who didn't survive. The ones who did scan, they survived, and then that got passed on to their kids and their kids, and eventually it becomes deep rooted in us, right? This idea of like our brain wiring is so many years old, and we still operate on that very basic fundamental.
Right. It's a survival instinct.
Yeah. So, and the thing is, and which is great now, like I don't walk out of my apartment building and worry about a bear attack. Like I'm cool that way now, but that part of my brain still exists and it's still looking for things. So it's like, well, if that isn't a threat to me, what else could be? And when it comes to athletes, then it's like, okay, what could be a threat to my dreams, my goals, and what I want? So when I think about where does it come from and can it be rewired, the answer is, I hate to put it this way, but the answer is yes and no. Because on the one hand, if you were going to completely remove that aspect of our brains and just say like, okay, I'm never going to scan for any potential problems or things like that, like you are removing such a core fundamental aspect of what has made humans human up to this point.
Right.
In a way, there's almost always going to be a kernel of our minds that will think that way. We can train ourselves to reduce that and reduce the impact on it 100%. But as a whole, like it's always going to be there to some extent. Right. So for me, it's more so learning how to cope with those thoughts and that focus when it does come up, because you can reduce it, but by all means, you're never going to purposefully, like you're never going to completely get rid of it. And that's fine. But on the other hand, you can train yourself to look for the good things, look for the things that you want and get excited about those things. And it's more so just, can you put purposeful focus and attention on what you want to happen? And do you have the skill to let go of the negative thoughts, the stressful thoughts, the one that add pressure that doesn't help you? If you can flush those things as quickly as possible and refocus your brain to like, okay, when my mind is on this, when I'm thinking about that, when my mind is clear, maybe, it depends on the athlete. Right. I'm at my best and I can get what I want.
Do you think, you said that constant scanning of, nowadays it's not really threat, but like what's going to take me away from what I want, right? Like we live a very cushioned life now. And I think for athletes, like the easy answer is injury. Maybe someone's perception gets so loud that everybody sees that one trending thing online now, and that's everybody's first impression of this one athlete. Or like, okay, here's my weaknesses in my game. I don't want these to stick out, so I need to work on my weaknesses, right? Would that be the kind of same part of the brain doing that function as well?
Yeah, 100%. Like the way that, and I can give you just examples of, say, like players who are gearing up for a draft year, like their draft year's coming up. Mm-hmm. And I've been really lucky with the work that I've got to do to work with players through many seasons of doing this. I've seen them go through it. I've seen the ones who do it well, and I've seen the ones who don't do it as well as they could have. Right. And typically the ones that I see who struggle more are the ones whose focus does shift a little more towards, okay, what am I lacking? What's not good enough right now? Because they have a dream, they have a clear goal, and that's good. But they put so much focus on, okay, where do I fall short of those? But instead of thinking of it as like, okay, here's an opportunity for me to work on these things and get better at it, they think of it from a threatening point of view of like, if I don't fix these things, if I don't get better at this, then I'm not going to go in the round I want. I won't go at all. Then I won't make my dreams come true. And that's the thing that they're scared of the most, right?
So
But
how would you go about of trying to change that switch of how that sounds like self-talk to me. How would you go about starting to change that self-talk, that self-inner dialect between yourself and you?
yeah, so I'd start. You always got to start with awareness, right? Like if you don't know that your sink is leaking, then you can't fix it. So you
I should
kind of
probably go
have,
check.
yeah. So you kind of have to recognize where you're at and what's going on. Like it doesn't amaze me because I've seen it so much, but so many players and people that I see who are struggling and not getting the most out of themselves don't realize that they are focusing on these things that are limiting them and holding them back. In many ways, I find, like, especially as athletes, we get trained at such a young age to look for and think about the areas that we aren't doing so well in, that, I'm not as good at that yet. And then we're trained to compare ourselves to other people and other players. And just like, we're wired from a very young age to think in this way where we're always focusing on, okay, I'm not good enough at this. So-and-so is better at that, these kind of things. So we need to be aware of what's holding us back first before we can get better. And once we're aware of it, then we need to find ways to either let go of those things that we're concerned with if we really don't need to focus on them, or if we do, like if a goalie needs to get better footwork to reach the goal that they have, like, yeah, that's something that we need to focus on. We have to do that. But in that case, then you need to flip it from being like, okay, if I don't do this, insert negative outcome here. Because if we think that way, it leads to stress, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And that stress is going to cloud that athlete's judgment. It's going to make it more difficult for them to be loose, relaxed, how they probably are when they're at their best. It can make it even harder for them to play how they want to play, right? So we need to learn how to flip those things into opportunities that we're excited about chasing and getting after, versus thinking about them as problems that need to be solved. And if they're not solved, then we're not going to reach our goals. Because thinking about it that way just makes it so much harder to do.
Yes. I think the simplest answer I could ever give, hockey is a lifetime sport. It might look different based on every decade you're alive with what your role is. And if you're in minor hockey, you have a lot of time to make those corrections. Like, I don't call them like the weaknesses. It's just corrections, right? Okay, you don't have a strong push to the left side or the right side. Let's spend a good amount of time starting to build those blocks up, right? Is it ever going to be a major strength? Maybe not. Are we going to gain confidence doing it? Absolutely, right? And if it's not perfect by tomorrow morning, that's okay. Like for me, like it takes a whole season to get ready for the playoffs, right? You have time. Game one, it matters, but in the long terms of things, it doesn't matter, right? It's nice to win. It's nice to start off hot, but you have time to readapt. I had something and I wanted to go somewhere and I lost it.
It'll come back. It always does.
I don't know, man. I've been hit in the head a lot with pucks. When this episode's going to go live, it's going to be August, and
Okay.
it's planned that way because I want this to come out well in advance of tryouts, but not too early that people are going to forget.
Yep. Love that.
Tryouts are absolute pressure cooker for
Mhm.
uh, the kids, the athletes, and the parents.
Yep.
Right. It's very rare that you meet both parents and athletes that enjoyed their time
Right.
going
Yep.
through it. Minor hockey is
Mhm.
soaring with putting everybody in that situation. But what do you think the best way to, before tryouts even start, start training your brain for that situation, knowing that it's going to be pressure filled, knowing what you want and what you don't want. What do you think a good route is for a month of developing your brain to think your way?
That's a really good question. So I love how you put a time limit on it too, because then you can kind of gear up to get the most out of it. So fundamentally, and I would say this for athletes at any point in time, it doesn't matter what time of year it is, where you're playing, what the context is. The best players in the world know how to keep their mind, keep their thoughts in the most productive place possible, and know how to bring it back there when it drifts off. So that skill, I'd say that's number one.
Okay, so learning how to be productive with your mind.
Yeah, 100%. Because I'd be willing to bet, and depending on how young the athlete is, it might be harder to come up with these kind of examples. But as a whole, anytime I ask a player, hey, like, can you think of your top 3 to 5 games or top 3 to 5 periods even that you've ever played? They'll say, yeah. And I'll be like, okay, can you think of how many similarities there were between all of them?
Ooh, I don't think I could give you that answer. Besides,
if
feeling in the, yeah, besides like being in the moment, feeling like the puck was a beach ball, body felt good.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be a big recipe. It doesn't have to be a big list, but there's typically some sort of pattern, right? And I like to think of it as a recipe, because if you give me the same ingredients and I put them together with the same proportions in the same order, and I put it in the oven at the same heat for the same amount of time,
yeah,
it's probably going to come out tasting about the same every time. Now, this is sports. There's so many other uncontrollable factors. Like, it's never going to be that cut and dry. But typically, when a player is at their best, there are certain things that they are doing, thinking, and thus feeling and experiencing before those games and during those games and even after those games. So I'd say the first thing that I would have a player do if we have like a month before a tryout is identify when I'm at my best, what am I thinking, what am I doing, and how do those things help me feel a certain way.
Could that be stepping stones into creating a routine for yourself?
100%.
Awesome.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'd say number one would be get an idea of what your recipe is.
Yeah.
Because your recipe is going to become your go-to. It's going to be your anchor, essentially. Right. You can even think of it as like ABCs. Like, I have players that I work with who will have these written on the knob of their stick or on the inside of their glove or on the top edge of their blocker there, whatever it is. And I'll ask them, like, if you had to describe your game at your best, but in like 2 or 3 words, what would they be? So like, let's say a forward's telling me like, yeah, like I read the play really well, I'm aggressive, and I play with speed. So, okay, you read, you're aggressive, and speed. Those are your keys to success. So they might put like RAS on the knob of their stick.
Right.
Somewhere. Like, that's the recipe. They know like, okay, whether my game's going really well and I'm feeling it and I'm rocking, or I have been all over the place, I'm making mistakes left, right, and center. If they know like, okay, when I do these things, I'm at my best, they can at least bring their attention back to that and just focus on doing that the next time that they're out there. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that truly matters is what you're doing right here, right now.
Love that. Listening to one of your previous podcast interviews, you talked a lot about being in the past, being in the future, and then being in the moment, right? Being in the present. And you brought up, you're like, a lot of this sounds like meditation, and meditation's such a wide scope of what it can and is, right? And you're like, I'm not going to ask a hockey player to go down, cross their legs, and sit like this, right? If they want to do that, go for it. But like, being mindful of where you are in space and time, for me, that was the light switch moment of when my game went from good to great consistently, is being able to be here and now, not think about, okay, we win this game, we're this seat, and then we're going to be in the playoffs at playing against that team. Hasn't happened yet, right? I do want to go back to the tryouts though.
No, you're kind of taken, in many ways, you read my mind, because that's essentially step two. Because once you know what yeah, I know you're on fire.
Thank you.
Once you know what your recipe is and you know where you want your mind to be, and you know, like, okay, when I'm thinking these things and doing these things, it helps me get in that space. Now you need to build the skill of being able to keep your mind in a certain spot.
Yeah.
And essentially, and like, I'm glad you brought it up, because there's so much stigma that comes along, even just with the word meditation. Like, anytime I do a session with a team where I'm introducing it for the first time, like, I warn them, I'm like, I'm going to say something that you've probably heard of before, and you think it's one thing, but it's really not. Like, all meditation truly is, at least from the purpose of how I like to explain it to these athletes, is it trains you to be able to be in the present moment with your focus on one thing. And when your focus drifts off, which it will, because we're human, being able to recognize that it drifts off and bring it back.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, every time it drifts off and you bring it back, it's like a bicep curl for your brain, basically. So one of the things I would recommend in this month that these players have is, on a regular basis, whether it's start with 3 minutes, work your way up as you get better at it, but like, train yourself just to keep your focus on one thing. Notice when it drifts off and bring it back. Notice when it drifts off, bring it back. Because when you're in that tryout environment and a distracting thought pops up in your head, you're like, oh, that coach saw that happen. Oh, that other goalie looks pretty good. I don't know, like, that comparison starts happening. That's your mind drifting off to these unproductive places.
Yeah.
Right. Now, some people will tell me, like, well, but these thoughts I'm thinking, like, they're true, right? Like, oh, the coach did see that, or, oh, like, that other player is good. And sure, it's true, but does keeping your mind there in that space, is that helping you be at your best right now?
Right.
And 9 times out of 10, it's not. So first, you kind of need to build the plan of, like, okay, where's my destination? Where do I want my mind to be to help me be at my best? Once you know what that is, you need to build the skill to be able to keep your mind there as much as you possibly can. And when it does drift off, bring it back to where you're going to be most productive. Because in those tryout environments, like, that's where it's the most distracting. It's the most, from an external and internal perspective, right? Like, externally, you have all this chaos going on of all these people around you who are vying for the spot. The energy around you is probably going to be pretty tense, nervous, and pressure filled. Like you said, even with, like, parents, the other athletes around you, like, everyone is probably on edge to some extent. And it's really easy for our bodies to tune into that external environment and be like, oh, well, this is how it is here, and kind of match it. Like, you actually need more mental strength to be able to keep yourself where you want to be when everyone around you is losing it to some extent.
Yeah. I think that's so important. And like, I think I've probably said this a handful of times on the podcast a long time ago. And we don't get very many listeners anyway, so I'll say it again. Why not? And when I was in college, on practice days, I would sit and be mindful. Yes, with my eyes closed, sometimes on the ground, sometimes just in a comfy chair, and listen to what's going on around, right? And I would just focus on the back of my eyelids, which is the way I was taught. And when a thought came in, and it does, you analyze why it's coming in, the importance of it, and then you let it go. And when you're done with it, not just the thought, but like the meditation, then you're like, okay, this thought came in. and now let's do something about it. Right.
Mm,
So get it off my plate. And then during game days, I would meditate 2 or 3 times that day for different reasons. The
love
fir-
that.
the first one was to clear my mind. The second one was actually to I would look up what the buildings looked like as much as possible.
Awesome.
And then I would walk myself through getting to the rink, getting my gear on, going through my warm up, getting onto the ice. What is it that the ice is going to look like? Right. So that is visualization, but it's a form
Mm,
of the meditation.
yep.
Right. So once I physically get there, I've been there, I've done it before. Right. What jersey are we wearing? What jersey color are they wearing? And then the third time was a mixture of both, but I would end it with visualizing the room that I was sitting in.
Mm,
Right.
nice.
And I am very flexible, and I was very uh my mobility was very high as well, but I could never cross my legs. So I'd just be sitting out with my feet just
Sure.
crazy far apart. And I'd always have a water, a coffee, my tennis balls, my lacrosse ball, and a couple pucks around me. And I'd visualize, okay, how far away is my coffee? Right.
Mm,
And if I wasn't sure, I'd keep my eyes closed, reach, and then I would do like a bird's eye view, and then I'd do from my point of view as well. And I kept growing the room, like what color are the walls. A lot of times I was in a hotel room, so it's always different,
right.
right? So, and then by the time I opened up, like it felt like I was seeing life in a fisheye lens, like complete 180.
Cool. Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
it was weird experiences, like weird cool. And unfortunately, I kind of gotten away from doing it that much or that discipline since I've left the sport being an athlete.
Hmm.
Um, and I think maybe I was on the above average side of how much I was doing it and practices I was doing.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Just based purely on, and I mean that in the best possible way, just based purely on the athletes that I talk to on a regular basis. Yeah.
And it just worked for me. Like, to be honest, like it made me feel good, made me feel confident. Did I
Mm,
have to do it? No, but if I did it, I knew I was like, okay, here's my baseline now. If I didn't do it, I would just have to focus a little bit more on my breathing before I got on the ice, and I would catch up to that baseline,
mm,
right? So I think it's so powerful being able to be in the present. And it took me a lot of years to practice even doing it for 10 minutes at a time of trying to keep a clear mind,
yeah.
right?
Oh yeah. It's a skill. Like the more you work on it, the better you get at it. And I'm going to throw a disclaimer for anyone who is listening to this and like, yeah, I just need a month before tryouts to work on this and I'll be all good.
No,
You'll get better by all means. Don't get me wrong, but like,
it's a journey, just like the sport.
yeah, yeah. And the more you work on it, the better at it you're going to get. There's so many, I love a lot of the aspects of what you did. And even I like how you finished it with where you were in that place and time, because once you open up and you're done, you would be so present. And
Yes.
just having that feeling of like, okay, this is what being present means for me right now. And having familiarity with that sensation is huge. It's like the more familiar you are with it, the more likely it is that you get into a certain moment. You can easily tap back into that feeling if you know what it feels like and that feeling's fresh.
Yeah. I would say I got a little overboard with it because I started doing it for tests in college of
Nice.
like
Yeah.
going through the exam process. What's our room? Where do we sit? What kind of questions? But yeah, I always looked at it as I want to go back just slightly because you said you think of meditation or mindfulness as a practice of something, and I can't quite remember being in the moment, being in the moment. I always thought of it as learning more about yourself,
Mm,
right? Okay, if
yeah.
I take out all these distractions, who am I? What am I? And what do I want?
Yeah.
Right?
I
Like
love that.
this is me and my brain talking seamlessly, hopefully, and it's telling me it's pulling from my subconscious
Mhm.
these thoughts. These thoughts are what my subconscious thinks of me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love that you mentioned that because I should put a little asterisk on what I'm saying. Like when it comes to that skill of being able to be right here, right now, that practice of, okay, no matter what drifts into my head, recognize it, let it go and come back. Like that's what's going to build that skill to be in the moment and come back to when you need to. But there are different forms of meditation, what it can be good for. And 100% taking note of like, okay, what is that thought? Why is it here? And going down that road
Yeah.
and just seeing where it takes you. Like it's so that's a different level of self-awareness that like is, I think, incredibly valuable, incredibly useful. Um, yeah. So I love that you were doing that. And I want to say like that is a very healthy, very beneficial aspect and part of meditation that you can certainly get things from 100%. I don't want to discount that whatsoever because it's true.
Thank you. A little pat on the back for myself. School of Hard Knocks right there.
Yeah. Did it your way too.
Yeah. I can't remember how I got into it, to be honest with you, but it probably just started, well, it probably started from a hockey camp somewhere doing just normal visualization. Save
Sure.
yourself or visualize yourself making saves. It's probably how it started. But back right back to trials. This is normally how the podcast goes. Right down a rabbit hole,
Oh,
bring
it's
it
good.
back.
It's good. It's fun that way.
Um, I would like to make this a whole other episode. That I was going to pitch you the idea after this one,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe we can do a bit of a teaser here. We talked a little bit of what the athletes can do that month prior and leading into the tryouts. It would be nice to finish the athletes off with what they can do during the tryouts to help them. And then
Mm-hmm.
also a little bit of what the parents can do to help their athletes, their kids with that process, right? They're like maybe the parents, this is their first time going through it, so they don't know what to do. Maybe it's their fifth time going through, right?
Yeah.
That role is so different for everybody and every kid and every parent. So
Yep.
it's always going to be changing. And I've always told the parents, like, let your kid approach you to dissect the game or whatever, right? Don't start telling them your opinion on how they did, even if it's positive. They might not be feeling that in the moment. Let them digest it themselves and then come to you, right? Is that the right way of going about that, or do you think there's a better way potentially?
Yeah, no, I love that. Like, I don't want to say that I'm old school in this way because unfortunately I don't think it's considered old school. But when it
And
comes
and you
to
and I aren't old enough to be old school yet.
that's fair. That's valid. I guess
Yeah.
just the old school quote unquote terminology that I've got from learning from people who've been in the game much longer than me. Um, just the idea of as a parent, you are there to support and enjoy the fact that your child is pursuing something and enjoy watching them pursue it and be supportive of no matter what happens. And just the fact that they are putting in that effort and doing that, like I just see that as number one here in a way of what we should be doing. Um, for parents, like leading up to and during tryouts, I'm a big believer in many ways, kind of like what you said in terms of waiting for the athlete to come to you in terms of talking about what happened. I'd almost like for parents to prerequisite and ask their kids, like, okay, what would make, what would I do or what can I do, say leading up to tryouts or during that tryout day? What do you want me to do? What can I do that would help you feel supported and feel good going into it? Just hearing from them, because like we as whether it's parents or coaches, we can have a perception of like, okay, here's what I think that athlete needs. But until you hear it from them first, we don't truly know. And the beautiful thing about it is when you ask the athletes, hey, what do you need? What do you want? All of a sudden you are giving them say and you're giving them almost a feeling of like, okay, I can dictate, I have some power over my environment, I have some control over this, and typically that feeling of control translates to a little more confidence.
Oh, yeah. Never thought about the confidence aspect.
Yeah. So, and part of it also too is just the familiarity of it. Like if the parent asks a week before tryouts, hey, leading up to tryouts and during tryouts, is there anything you do want me to say, don't want me to say, anything you want me to do or don't do? As a parent, when you go through that routine with them on the first day of tryouts, the athlete's probably going to feel that much more comfortable, more relaxed, because it's like, okay, this is exactly how I want it to be. This is great. As long as what they're asking is within your control, obviously. Like,
yes.
If it's not, then we need to adjust some expectations. But if it is within your control, like just asking them, what kind of support do you want? What do you don't want? And giving that out to that sense of like, okay, it's going to go this way. I can feel confident about that, feel a little more relaxed, a little more comfortable.
Yeah.
That part's huge for me. And for the parents, when it comes to after, say, like if it tryouts are 3 or 4 days after the first day, planning ahead with your athlete ahead of time, like, okay, after the tryout, what do you want to do? Do you want me to ask? Do you not want me to? Like, just so that you can have a feeling of like, okay, I'm going to follow protocol here. And if the athlete after the tryout communication is like, you know what, I know I said I wanted this, but now I really want that.
Yeah. Be open to changes.
Yeah. You can make that change on the fly for sure.
Yeah.
But I agree with you in terms of like, if we just jump straight into judging it from our perspective and what we saw, whether it's coaches or parents, like 99.99% of the time, we want to say what we want to say because we think it's going to be helpful and because we care about that person. So no matter what comes into your head, whether it's productive or not, I think it's important to give ourselves some grace and recognize that, okay, this is coming from a good place. But also recognize, even though we think it's good and we think it's helpful, depending on the state of the athlete and what happened and where they're at that time, it might be the right message, but maybe a wrong time.
Yeah.
Could be a wrong message at the wrong time. And we don't know, right? So I'm always a big fan of asking first and getting a sense of where the athlete is and what they want before offering anything.
Yeah.
Like,
I think that's so huge. So huge. And especially before it's the day of, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb and predict that 9 out of 10 kids, as soon as you ask them, what do you want us to do as adults to help you through tryouts? They're going to go, I don't know. Right. Give them time to think about it. Like, that's a whole new thought process they probably never had before.
Correct.
Right. And then to touch back on the wrong message, wrong time, or right message, wrong time. Think of if you've ever played golf with your dad and you top a ball. What's the first thing every dad's going to say? Keep your head down, keep your eye on the ball. And all you're thinking is like, yeah, I know. Great message, wrong time.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
Let that digestion happen. Maybe as a parent, I'm not a parent, so this is not parenting advice from me. But when I was going through tryouts with my family, it wasn't until I was in juniors that my parents respected that digestion time and allowed me to come to them.
Yep.
All that they asked me to do is, hey, can we debrief every night? Right? We'll give you your space, but before we go to bed, we want to make sure we talk it out. So when we wake up the next morning, it's not lingering, it's done. We're all on the same page again. Right?
Nice.
Being minor hockey, those ice times end earlier than normal. You might only have a few hours before bedtime happens. But like, it's important to get a conversation. Just tell your athlete, tell your kid, we'll wait for you. we just ask that you come up to us,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
we'll go up what you're telling us.
Nice.
I
Yeah, I
think.
like that. I like that. And one thing that comes to mind for me here as well is we need to think about the long term. When I say long term, this could be over the course of the athlete's career, or it could be over the course of the 4-day span of, say, tryouts or whatever it is. We need to think about maintaining the relationship with the athlete that we want to have first and foremost. And a big part of that relationship and how we impact that relationship comes down to how we communicate with them in certain moments. Like if you're playing golf with your dad and you top a ball and the first thing he says is like, hey, keep your head down. How does that change where we're at purely just emotionally? Like we have the thought of like, yeah, I know, but emotionally, we probably get a little bit of a rise, get a little bit frustrated. And now we've connected that little bit of frustration to, well, where did that feeling come from? It came from my dad saying this, right? And, obviously we can get over these things with time, but like, you don't want to feel like let's say you hop in the car after the first day of tryouts and you're driving back and the conversation immediately goes to, well, I saw you doing this, this, and this, and it didn't really quite work so well for you. And the athlete in their head's thinking like, yeah, I know, I lived it, wasn't good. And now I'm reliving it in my head. And they're probably a little stressed or a little frustrated, whatever it is, right? And then when they hop back in the car for the next day and they hop in with the parents again, the people who delivered that message and had that emotional impact. Now, it obviously depends on the relationship and where things are at, but there's more of a chance that some of those negative feelings, especially because it happened in that car environment, like a lot of us take emotional cues from where we are and what we've experienced in that place in the past. Like I have a friend of mine who had a pretty scary incident with a mugger happen in Toronto like decades ago. And he says to this day, if he goes back to the city and goes back to that street corner, he has this rush of adrenaline and stress because that thing happened to him there decades ago. Now, obviously that's a very extreme example, but if stressful or if negative conversations happen regarding hockey in the car, then every time the athlete steps into the car, part of their brain is probably getting ready for that. Like we said, brains are prediction machines that are looking for the negatives, right? Because we're trying to protect ourselves from that stuff. Right. So even subconsciously, the athlete could be like, okay, when I've sat back here the last couple of days, I've got some messages that I didn't really like as much. So I'm going to get into my shell and prepare for that a little bit. And then the athlete's showing up to the rink, probably not feeling as loose, relaxed, confident, and focused on what they want to. It's going to make the rest of their day a little bit harder. Not impossible, but a little bit harder.
Interesting.
Yeah. So just the idea of like maintaining the relationship that you have and recognizing that the messages that you portray and when you portray them can have an impact that could be associated with you as the parent or in that environment, and understanding like the athlete can't get away from that environment. Right. So they're always going to come back. Right. Unless they're billeting and they drive their own car. Right. But until you get to that point, like they're always going to come back. So the impact that you have on them might last a little bit longer than the average parent thinks about.
And so you had a callback, and I'll do a callback now too. So for the parents, it's about being mindful of when, where, and what you're saying. Right. And it is a little wild seeing the parents of this generation compared to like our generation parents of there's a lot more, I'll tread lightly, but there's a lot more buddy I find with today's parents. And then at least with my parents, I really can't speak for anybody else. There was a lot more parenting right? In the sense of like, this is how we act as a Hales family. We go
Sure.
to a family friend's house. This is how we act at their house, like that sort of thing. And I'm sure that's still there, but that set the discipline from my side and my sister's side. Okay, when our parents tell us this is how we do it, this is how we do it.
Right.
It's instead of them asking us what we want to do. Right. And like times change. I totally understand that. I'm not stuck in the old school way either. I think you have to have that open relationship with the athlete, with the kid, and be like, look, there's time to be a parent. This is your thing. This is your tryouts. I can't make the team for you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want from us to help you best? Take time to think about it, and you can approach us with it. Right. So
Yeah.
I think that's really good. I'm happy with everything that we've said. Um, why don't we wrap up with one more piece of wisdom um, that we can leave the athletes with? They have a month until tryouts, maybe 5 weeks if they're lucky till tryouts. What's a bonus tidbit of information that we can leave them on?
So what I'm going to give you here, give me one sec while I adjust
All
my
good.
lighting here. Okay. So I'm going to leave you with something that you told me you really liked during the seminar that we were on. Just the idea of the bear in the woods analogy of stress. So the way that I like to look at stress or pressure essentially is as an elite athlete, as an athlete who's, competing, it's not a question of when you feel pressure or when you feel stress. It's just a question of how often do you feel it, and when you do you have the tools to properly manage it? So if I go, and this is actually a much better example for you, like let's say if you go for a hike like today, is there a chance that you're going to run into a bear just based on where you live and where you go hiking?
Based on where I live, no.
Okay.
Based on where I used to live, yes.
Okay. So let's say if you were living there now and you're the type like you like to go out for a hike every day or every other day, whatever it is, if you keep putting yourself in that environment where the bear could pop up, it's statistically likely eventually you're going to see them.
Yeah.
Right. And for these athletes, like when you're putting yourself in these competitive situations, it's not a question of, oh, am I going to feel some pressure? Am I going to feel some stress at some time or not? It's a question of when it does pop up, which it will, are you ready for it? Do you have a plan for it? Now,
don't wait for it.
Yeah, don't wait for it. Prepare for it. Get ready for it because it's probably going to come. So one thing that I really like to have the athletes do is have a plan ahead of time of like, okay, if I do get into the tryout and I do catch myself comparing myself to someone else, or like a puck goes by me that really shouldn't have, and I get upset with myself about that. What am I going to do to bring myself back to being in that state of mind that I already planned for myself of being in? And if we've been working on the meditation side of recognizing when our mind drifts off and bringing it back, by all means, that'll help out a lot. Really quickly, and this is surface level stuff, but it helps still. Your brain and your body are very connected. And if you can influence what your body is doing first, it's actually helping you change how you feel a lot faster than if you try to think your way out of being stressed. So if you can breathe deep, if you can breathe like a calm, relaxed person, and maybe even chances are whenever we get frustrated or negative, usually our muscles tense up a little bit. So if you can breathe your way into being a little bit more like a calm, relaxed person, if you can roll the muscles out, maybe introduce some tension on purpose and let it go. Like for example, this would be like slow, deep breath in, squeeze the shoulders a bit. And then when you breathe out, let the muscles go at the same time. That's a great way to send a message to your brain saying, okay, I'm breathing like a chill person and my muscles feel loose and relaxed, which means I must feel a little more calm, which will then help you feel a little bit more calm and relaxed. So having a plan, a combination of like, okay, what am I going to think about that's going to help me get back to where I want to be, but also what can I do to feel how I want to feel? For me, those are big, but I'm going to add on a little extra bit that we never talked about during the seminar because we didn't have time. And that is, there are people, and I saw a video of this a few days ago. I loved it so much. There are people who have a whole job of leading hikes where they want to go guide people to see bears so they can photograph them. Right. So there are people who are guides who will go out and say, like, okay, we're not going on a walk and hoping we don't run into a bear, because that could be dangerous. We're going on a walk and we're looking for them. We want to be in this situation. And they don't think about it as we want to be in this situation because it could be dangerous, it could be negative. We want to be in that situation because even if it could be dangerous, that's a thrill for us. That's exciting for us. It's what we want. So a really cool thing that I think so many athletes could work on is practicing thinking about those stressful situations, those pressure-filled situations as those, hey, we want this. Like, this is fun. Let's go find these situations. Let's get into it. So planning out not just where you want your mind to be when you're at your best, but planning out, thinking about the situation in a way where you almost like the pressure or you're excited about it, and finding ways to frame it so that you feel good about those kind of scenarios. Because the scenario is the same. Like, you can go on a walk and the bear could pop up. The question is, like, okay, am I prepared to deal with this? And how am I choosing to think about the situation?
Wow. Yeah, those people are some people special right there, going chasing bears.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like going into a storm, right? There's always analogies with like calm before the storm or face the storm head on. But I guess it really does only work if you're mentally prepared to do that, right?
Yep.
You've analyzed what's the best way forward, and you're like, yeah, okay, 1 foot forward, let's do it.
Yeah. And just accepting that it's part of the game. Like, why would we try to hide from that fact?
Yeah.
Like, it's going to happen. Let's be ready for it, and let's find a way to enjoy it, because it isn't a true life or death situation. Like, we're playing a game that we love to play. So let's find ways to look at it where we can tap into that love for the game and enjoy the environment that we're in and find some fun in it, instead of just thinking about, oh, well, what are the negative things that could come from this?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. Being all the way out east,
Yeah, no worries. It was a lot of fun.
You're 3 hours ahead, I think, of me, maybe 4. I really appreciate it. We would love to have you back to dive deeper in another topic, whatever that topic's going to be. Who knows at the moment, but that was awesome. Thank you for your time. Where can we find you? If people have any questions, where can they reach you, if that's a possibility or not? If people are looking for guidance and a sports psychologist or a high performance mental trainer, where can they find you at? What can they do to get in contact with you?
Yeah. So I guess Instagram, LinkedIn might be two good ways. I don't know if I'll throw my personal email out here just yet, but yeah, I'd say, I guess LinkedIn, just my name, Jackson Slauenwhite. It's a lot easier to say than it looks. It'll be written in the description here, so don't worry about the spelling of it. It'll be all good. For Instagram, Locked In Performance would be the one. I'm always happy to nerd out on this stuff. It's a lot of fun. Like we got to do today on the podcast here. It was great. It was a lot of fun. So if anyone doesn't have any questions, or you just want to nerd out on more stuff, by all means, happy to do so.
If you have any questions, you can either reach out to our Instagram, One Stop Goaltending, or the Goalie Corner, or you can reach out to Locked In Performance. Drop a question and we'll get back to you, hopefully at a reasonable time. And if you have any topics that you would like to hear, let us know as well. We'll nerd out on those topics.
Love it.
Awesome.